Relax and listen to the voice. The folk story of Okiku. Once there was a beautiful servant named Okiku. She worked for the samurai Aoyama Tesan. Okiku often refused him when he said he was in love with her and he wanted to marry her. So he tricked her into believing that she had carelessly lost one of the family's 10 precious delft plates. Such a crime would normally result in her death. In a frenzy, she counted and recounted the 9 plates many times. However, she could not find the 10th and went to Aoyama in guilty tears. The samurai offered to overlook the matter if she finally became his lover, but again she refused. Enraged, Aoyama threw her down a well to her death. It is said that Okiku became a vengeful spirit, an Onryo, who tormented her murderer by counting to 9 and then making a terrible shriek to represent the missing 10th plate. Or perhaps she had tormented herself and was still trying to find the 10th plate, but cried out in agony when she never could. In some versions of the story, this torment continued until an exorcist or neighbor shouted, 10, in a loud voice at the end of her count. Her ghost, finally relieved that someone had found the 10th plate for her, haunted the samurai no more. Futakuchi-Onna, or the Two-Mouthed Woman. Futakuchi-Onna is a monstrous woman with a tiny mouth. However, on the back of her head, hidden beneath her hair, she has a huge second mouth. The woman's skull splits apart, revealing lips, teeth, and a tongue. Although she appears to never eat, the mouth in the back of her head is ravenous and consumes huge quantities of food. They say that the big mouth has a mind of its own and speaks to the woman, mumbling spiteful and threatening things to her. The mouth will harass the woman and threaten her, demanding food. It will screech obscenely and cause the woman tremendous pain until it's fed. The monstrous mouth can also control the woman's hair, making it snake out like tentacles, grabbing food and shoveling it down its throat. There is some disagreement in Japan as to Futakuchi-Onna's origin and how she got her second mouth. One story from Japanese folklore tells of an old miser who lived by himself in a small village. He never got married because he hated spending money. He thought that if he took a wife, he would have to pay for her food, and he could not bear the idea of parting with his wealth. It so happened that he came across a young woman who did not eat a thing, and he immediately asked her to marry him. Because she seemed to never eat and was a hard worker, the old miser was thrilled that he found the woman of his dreams, and the couple were very happy together. However, he began to wonder why his stores of rice were steadily decreasing. One day, the old man pretended to leave for work, but instead stayed behind to spy on his new wife. To his horror, he saw his wife's hair part on the back of her head, her skull split wide open, revealing a gaping, deformed mouth. Her hair reached out like tentacles, grasping handfuls of rice and shoveling it into the monstrous mouth. When the woman noticed her husband had discovered her secret, she attacked him and tried to strangle him. He managed to get away and hid in the mountains. Weeks later, when he worked up the courage to return, he found that the woman had gone and all of his stores of rice had been eaten. The old man never married again. In another story, a man's wife died, leaving him with a daughter to care for. The man remarried, but his new wife was a very mean and vindictive person. Together, they had a second child, another daughter. However, they were very poor and there was barely enough food to go around. The new wife decided to keep her own daughter fed while she starved the other girl. The man's daughter eventually died of starvation. Not long afterwards, the man was out in the garden chopping wood for the fire. He accidentally swung his axe incorrectly and embedded it into the back of his new wife's head. There was a lot of blood, and he expected that the woman would die. She survived, but the open wound never healed. Instead, it formed into a huge drooling mouth, complete with teeth and a tongue. The woman was in tremendous pain, and the only way to make it stop was to feed the deformed mouth. It demanded more and more food to keep it satisfied. Eventually, the mouth began making sounds and started talking. One day, while the woman was asleep, the hideous mouth spoke to her husband and confessed,
I am cursed because I killed your daughter by starving her to death.
The Kappa. The Kappa has the face of a monkey with the beak of a turtle and a plate-shaped depression in the top of his head. He has green skin like a frog and a turtle shell on his back. His arms and legs are able to stretch out really long, and his hands and feet are webbed like those of a frog. Kappas usually play pranks such as delivering loud, smelly farts and peeking up women's dresses. However, they have also been known to commit horrible crimes like kidnapping small children and killing people and eating their internal organs. The Kappa will lurk underwater in rivers and streams, waiting for its victims. In olden days in Japan, people would go squat by the side of the river and go to the toilet. It's said that the Kappa would swim underneath you until it could see your big bare butt hanging over the side of the bank, and then it would attack you when you least expected it. Sometimes the Kappa would grab you by your butt and drag you into the water, holding you under the surface until you drowned. At other times, the Kappa sticks his elongated arm up through your insides and grabs hold of your tongue. Then, the Kappa pulls your tongue out through your butt, turning your body inside out. Finally, as you flop around on the ground with your skin on the inside and your guts on the outside, the Kappa would take your liver out and eat it whole. Nowadays, since people go to the toilets indoors, the Kappa lurks in sewers and bathroom pipes. He sticks his arm up into your toilet, waiting for you to come along and sit down on the bowl. So if you're ever sitting on the toilet and you feel something moving underneath you, jump up as fast as you can. You may just avoid being turned inside out by a Kappa. The Snake Woman. The Snake Woman, or Nurre-Onna, haunts the shoreline and preys on unsuspecting swimmers and fishermen. When she spots her prey, she rises from the water and paralyzes her victims with her eyes. She then uses her long, snake-like tongue to suck all the blood out of her victims' bodies. Despite her incredible length, Nurre-Onna can hide in deceptively shallow pools of water. She's even been known to use her beautiful face and hair to lure swimmers to their deaths. She bobs her head on the surface of the water and flaps her arms, pretending to be a drowning woman. When someone dives in and attempts to save her, she rises up, snatches them with her claws, and drags them down into the murky depths. Once Nurre-Onna has you in her sights, it is difficult to escape the grasp of the Snake Woman. She can suddenly spring great distances to grab you, so the best way to protect yourself against her is to avoid walking alone on the beach or anywhere near water at night. White String. A young girl desperately wanted to get her ears pierced. Her parents said that she was too young, but she pleaded with them, saying that all the other girls in her class had pierced ears. Eventually, her parents relented and agreed to let her do it. They gave her some money, and they told her to go to the local mall and get her ears pierced in a jewelry store. Instead, the girl decided to keep the money and do the piercing herself. She got her best friend to help her do it. They heated up a large needle and stuck it through both of the girl's earlobes. It was quite painful, but in the end, her ears were pierced and she was delighted to be able to wear earrings. However, a few days later, the girl was in school and she began to feel a pain in her left ear. Her earlobe was extremely itchy. During break time, she went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. Her earlobe was red and inflamed, and she began scratching at it. When she looked closely, she saw what looked like the end of a piece of white string sticking out of the hole in her earlobe. Thinking it was very strange, she started picking and pulling at it. After a few minutes, there was a long piece of white string hanging out of her pierced earlobe. There didn't seem to be any end to it. Finally, she got a pair of scissors and cut the string. Suddenly, everything went pitch black. She couldn't see. She was rushed to the emergency room of the local hospital where a doctor examined her. When she told the doctor what had happened, he was shocked.
"I'm sorry. You'll be blind for the rest of your life," he said to her. "That wasn't a white string. That was your optic nerve."
The human-faced dog. Jinmenken are dogs with human faces. They are almost always seen at night in urban areas of Japan. Those who have seen them say they look just like an ordinary dog from afar, but when they turn around, you see that they have a human face. The Jinmenken are also able to speak and often challenged witnesses in a weary voice, saying things like, "Mind your own business," or "I'm free to do whatever I want." In some reports, they're seen outside people's houses, rooting through the rubbish, and in other reports, they're spotted chasing cars and frightening drivers on the expressways. In one story, there was a restaurant that dumped its trash outside the back door. One night, the chef saw a stray dog rummaging through the rubbish for leftover food. He went out to get rid of the dog, but when he tried to chase it away, the dog looked back over its shoulder and said to him, "Leave me alone." In another story, a man was driving on the highway and noticed a dog in his rearview mirror. It was chasing his car as he drove at speeds over 100 miles per hour. The dog ran so fast that at one point it was side by side with the car. The driver looked over and was shocked to see that the animal had a human face, and it said, "Do not look at me." The driver was so astonished that he veered off the road and suffered a terrible accident. The human-faced dogs are usually thought of as being a bad omen of things to come, and are often blamed for accidents and disasters. Between 1989 and 1990, hysteria about the Jinmenken reached its height in Japan. People were calling the police and demanding that they rid their neighborhoods of human-faced dogs. Auto accidents involving a sighting of the Jinmenken were so frequent that police had to investigate the possibility that the creatures actually existed. Some people believe that human-faced dogs are the spirit of traffic accident victims who have been reincarnated as dogs. Others believe they are dogs possessed by evil spirits. Some even say that the Jinmenken are the human-dog hybrids who were created in the secret biological experiments and managed to escape from laboratories. Kokkuri-San. Kokkuri-San is the most famous scary game in Japan. It's similar to a Ouija board and is mostly played by Japanese school children who are trying to summon a spirit so they can ask it questions about the future. Kokkuri-san, Kokkuri-san, tell me, when is the date of my death? Two Japanese girls watch in breathless anticipation as a 10-yen coin begins to slide across a sheet of paper, slowly spelling out the answer. Kokkuri-San is Japan's answer to the Ouija board, and it has been played in schoolrooms across the country for years. The game became so widespread in Japan that it sparked several hysterias in the media, and many schools officially banned students from playing Kokkuri-San. Using a Ouija board can be dangerous because it can accidentally summon demons or open people up to the possibility of being possessed. Kokkuri-San is much less dangerous since the spirit who is summoned is a trickster spirit from the Shinto religion. Kokkuri-San is the name of the spirit who is summoned during the game and provides the answers. It's an animal spirit that is a mixture between a fox, a dog, and a raccoon. The fox can be either a trickster or a teacher. The dog is loyal and protecting, and the raccoon dog is full of mischief, but also a bringer of good luck. All of these qualities are combined in Kokkuri-San. Young people ask many questions like, Kokkuri-San, who loves me? Or, Kokkuri-San, will I become rich and famous? But just remember that there are some questions you are better off not knowing the answer to. To play Kokkuri-San, you need at least 2 people, a sheet of paper, a pen, and a coin. Take a blank sheet of paper and draw a tori, which is a traditional Japanese gate, at the top in red ink. Write yes and no on either side of the tori. Beneath this, write 1 row of numbers from 0 to 9 and 3 rows of letters from A to Z. Then, open a window or a door so that Kokkuri-San will be able to enter the room. The tori represents the gateway to a Shinto shrine, and the spirit will enter and exit through it. Next, place a coin on the red tori. Each person should put their index finger on the coin. Then call the spirit by saying, Kokkuri-San, Kokkuri-San, if you're here, please move this coin. Next, you can ask Kokkuri-San whatever questions you like. It will move the coin to spell out the answer. Once you're done, and to end the game, you must ask Kokkuri-San to leave by saying, Kokkuri-San, Kokkuri-San, please return home. The coin will move to yes, and then come to a rest on the red tori. Once you're certain that Kokkuri has left, you must destroy the paper, either tear it to pieces or burn it. You must also spend the coin you used before the end of the next day. I must put this out as a warning. Kokkuri-San is not dangerous, and it is a much safer alternative to the Ouija board. However, we still don't recommend that you play it. Many people can become upset and depressed if they receive answers that they do not like. Also, always remember that Kokkuri-San is a trickster spirit and can easily lie and deceive you. The Red Crayon. A married couple who had just returned from their honeymoon decided to buy a house. The couple were very happy because they managed to get the house at a very cheap price. It was in a nice neighborhood, close to the city, and just a short walk from a shopping center. One day, the husband was walking down the hall when he spotted a red crayon lying on the floor. The couple didn't have any children, so the husband wondered where the crayon had come from. Perhaps the previous residents left it behind, he said to himself as he casually threw the crayon in the trash. The next day, the husband came home from work to find another red crayon lying exactly in the same spot. He was very puzzled and decided to ask his wife about it. When he asked his wife, she grew very pale in the face just hearing him bringing it up. She told him that every day since they first moved into the house, she'd been finding red crayons when she was cleaning. They were always lying in the same spot, at the end of the hallway. The husband was standing in the hallway, wondering about this weird phenomenon, and he began to notice something was not quite right. All of a sudden, the hallway seemed like it was too short. He tapped on the wall at the end of the hallway and heard a hollow sound. Curious, he began peeling off the wallpaper, despite the protests of his wife. Behind the wallpaper, they found a pair of sliding doors. It was as if someone had carefully hidden the entrance to a closet or a small room. The husband discovered that the sliding doors had been nailed shut. He got a hammer from his toolbox and began prying out the nails one by one. After pulling out the last nail, he slowly opened the sliding door to reveal the small hidden room. Looking inside, they saw that the white walls of the little space were covered with words scribbled in red crayon. Over and over again were the words, "Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out. Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out. Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out. Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out." The Bald Man, or Kanbari Nudo. At night, the bald man goes from house to house, peeking in bathroom windows and watching people while they're sitting on the toilet, taking a shower, or getting undressed. He's an old, creepy-looking Japanese man, and he shoves his head up against the window and drools at the mouth while he spies on you, hoping to catch you in the nude. Years ago, there was an old man who was obsessed with seeing young girls naked. This creepy and depraved individual stalked the streets of his village at night, peeking in the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of bare flesh. When his family found out about his disgusting behavior, they were ashamed and refused to have anything to do with him. To punish him, they shaved his head and banished him from the village. The bald man then built himself a hut in the mountains and went there to live as a hermit. He did his best to stop thinking about girls and nudity, but it was no use. His sinister urges were taking him over, and he was powerless to resist. Finally, he gave in to his weird compulsions, and in the dead of night, he crept into the village and kidnapped a young girl. He brought her back to his hut, where he kept her tied up and did horrible things to her. One day, while the bald man was away, a thief came across his unguarded hut and decided to steal the man's belongings. When he went inside, he found a young girl who had been kidnapped. Taking pity on the poor girl, he untied her. Just as he was helping her to escape, the bald man returned. There was a big fight, but in the end, the thief managed to kill the bald man and brought the girl back to her grateful parents. After that, the bald man returned as a ghost and began to peer outside the girl's house. He wore a white kimono and peered through the windows at night, frightening everyone inside. The parents were worried that the ghost would attempt to kidnap her again, so they hid their daughter. From that time on, the bald man's ghost has been going from house to house, peeping in the windows of toilets, bathrooms, and bedrooms, desperately looking for young girls. They say that if you chant his name, Kanbari Nudo, in the bathroom, his bald head will sometimes appear in the toilet bowl. If you chant Kanbari Nudo, Lesser Cuckoo, in your bathroom on New Year's Eve, the bald man will never trouble you again. In one story, a young girl was going to the bathroom late one night. She stood up and reached for the toilet paper when she heard a strange chuckling noise behind her. She turned around and saw a face pressed up against the frosted glass of her bathroom window. She could make out the features of an old bald man, and he was peeping in on her and laughing quietly to himself. The other side of the window was completely covered in drool. The young girl was petrified with terror and ran out of the bathroom with her pants around her ankles, screaming for her parents. When she told her father what she had seen, he flew into a rage and ran outside to confront the disgusting old man. However, when he got to the alley behind the house, he found it empty. Then the father looked at the bathroom window. There were iron bars across the window, and there was a 10-centimeter gap between the bars and the frosted glass. There's no way anyone could have pressed their face up against the glass. A chill ran down his spine as he realized that whatever was peeping at his daughter while she was on the toilet could not have been human. In another story, there was a young Japanese girl who was very embarrassed about her body. One evening, she was playing volleyball with a bunch of other girls. After the game, she had to take a shower, but she was too ashamed to let anyone else see her naked. Instead, she waited until all the other girls had finished before going into the shower herself. All alone in the dimly lit shower room, she dropped her towel and turned on the shower. The water pressure seemed to be weak because all that came out was a slow dribble of water. She did her best to wash herself in the weak trickle of water. Halfway through her shower, she heard the faint sound of laughter. It sounded like an old man giggling and chuckling to himself. She looked around, but she couldn't see anyone. She listened hard, searching for the source of the weird noise, but all that she heard was silence. The girl continued showering until she heard the laughter again. This time it was much louder.
"Hey, you creep," she shouted. "Don't think that I can't hear you."
She felt so vulnerable standing naked in the shower with nothing to cover her that she decided to hurry up and finish quickly. Just as she was about to leave, she heard the laugh again. This time, it was very loud. It seemed to be coming from above. She looked up at the shower head and saw something that made her run screaming from the room. Instead of a shower head, it was an old man's head poking out of the wall above. He was staring down at her, grinning creepily and drooling all over her. Dripping bathroom. The bathroom in our company is a little strange. It's a place where a lot of people trip and fall. The strange thing is that there's nothing to trip over. Yesterday, my friend Yuki was in the bathroom. When she came out of the stall, she tripped over and fell onto the tiled floor. She scraped her knee really badly. We took her to the break room and helped put a Band-Aid on her bleeding knee. "Are you okay?" I asked her. "Yeah, I guess so," Yuki replied weakly. "You really are careless," laughed Sakura, one of our co-workers. "It's not my fault," Yuki protested. "Sato-san from the sales department fell in the bathroom last week, and the week before, so did Hana-san." "And even though you knew that, you still fell?" Sakura said. "You're so clumsy. How do people keep tripping in there? You guys need to be more careful." I couldn't say anything. I didn't want to be the one to tell the others. A few days later, Sakura was in the bathroom. When she came out of the stall, she fell too. She said that she felt it was as if she tripped over something, even though there was nothing there. "Now who's the one that's careless?" Yuki chuckled to herself. "It wasn't my fault," Sakura complained. "When you step out of that stall, it's as if something's there. Last time, when you tripped in the bathroom, didn't you feel like you tripped over something?" "What do you mean?" asked Yuki. "There's nothing there," said Sakura, "but it still felt like, I don't know. Maybe it's just my imagination." "Midori, when you go to the bathroom, be careful," they told me. "It would be weird if all three of us had Band-Aids on our knees." I laughed nervously and assured them that I would be careful, but I know I won't trip and fall. That's because I'm the only one that can see them. The dead women lying on the bathroom floor, tripping everyone who come out of the stalls. Himuro Mansion. According to the legend, the Himuro Mansion is a large traditional Japanese house that is located in a rocky area somewhere on the outskirts of Tokyo. The mansion became famous for being the site of the worst mass murder in the history of Japan. The Himuro family were said to have practiced ancient and forgotten Shinto rituals that had long been outlawed in Japan. One of these occult rituals was called the Strangling Ritual and involved the sacrifice murder of a young girl. The purpose of this gruesome ritual was to protect the Himuro family from bad karma, which they believed would emerge from a portal in the mansion's courtyard. The strangling ritual had to be performed every 50 years to prevent the bad karma from destroying the family. They would select a baby girl from within the family and raise her in secret. They called her the Rope Shrine Maiden. The girl had to be kept away from the rest of the world in complete isolation, or else the ritual would not work. When the time came for the ritual to be performed, they dragged her out to a shrine in the courtyard and tied ropes around her neck, her arms, and her legs. Next, a team of oxen would pull the ropes in different directions, tearing the young girl's body apart. The blood-stained ropes were then placed over a portal in the mansion's courtyard, sealing the gateway. If the ritual was a success, it would keep the bad karma away for another half-century until the ritual had to be again repeated. For generations, this tradition was passed down through the Himuro family. However, during the preparations for the last recorded ritual, something went wrong. The Rope Shrine Maiden fell in love with a young boy she saw from the window of the mansion. This was a disaster because she was supposed to remain pure and free from worldly influences. Her blood and spirit were tainted, and when she was sacrificed, the ritual failed miserably because she was no longer pure. Upon learning of the maiden's love, the head of the Himuro family became distraught. He was responsible for ensuring that the ritual was a success. Fearing that disaster would now befall the family, he went on an insane rampage throughout the mansion. He brutally murdered the entire Himuro family, hacking them to death with his traditional Japanese sword, the katana. The head of the family believed that, by killing them, he was saving them from a certain doom. When every person in the mansion lay dead, he decided to fall upon his own katana. The local people in the neighboring village kept quiet about the story of Himuro Mansion for decades. Ever since then, people have reported a variety of weird happenings or inexplicable phenomenon taking place on the property. Bloody handprints and large red stains have been found splattered all over the walls inside. Ghostly apparitions have been seen both at night and in broad daylight. As legend would have it, these are the ghosts of the murdered family members. It is said that they will attempt to repeat the failed ritual using whoever is daring or foolhardy enough to enter the abandoned building. People who enter the house are occasionally found dead, with rope marks on their arms and legs indicating that they have been bound and pulled. Others have been torn to pieces in the underground network of tunnels that lies beneath the mansion. Nobody knows who made these tunnels or what purpose they served, but stories suggest that they were involved in the strangling ritual. There's also a certain window in the house that has become infamous. They say that if you take a photo of this window, the ghostly image of a young girl in a kimono will appear in the developed photograph. These incidents have provoked fear in the people of Tokyo, and many believe that those who venture near this area will become cursed. The deaths of 7 people on the property are unexplained to this day. The urban legend of the Himuro Mansion became popular in the West when the Japanese video game Fatal Frame was released in English. Ghost stories about the haunted house blew into a worldwide craze. If the legends are true, the Himuro Mansion is definitely one of the most haunted places in Japan. Night School. Years ago in Japan, there was an urgent need for new schools. There were rumors that the government needed to find cheap land on which they could build the schools, so they built them on the sites of old cemeteries. This gave rise to rumors and gossip among kids that their schools were haunted. They say that if you go to your school at midnight, you will see and hear many strange things, like a candle floating across the school grounds, disembodied footsteps echoing down the hall, and statues with eyes that follow you as you pass by. In the science room, the anatomical skeletons come alive, and you hear the sound of an invisible ball bouncing in the gym, and you might even see a ghostly severed head flying around the classrooms. If you walk across the schoolyard, ghostly hands will emerge from below and try to drag you down. If you dig on the school grounds, you will unearth headstones and tombs. If you go swimming in the pool, ghostly hands will grab your legs and try to drown you. Old buildings appear on the school grounds, and there are staircases that lead to nowhere. If you walk up them, you will disappear. They say that one stall in the toilets is haunted, and if you enter it, a rope will fall from the ceiling in the shape of a noose. In one small town in Japan, there was a group of teenage boys who had heard rumors about their school. According to the legend, if you went to the school at midnight on the 15th day of the month, strange things would happen. There was a statue that stood on the path leading up to the school, and its eyes would supposedly follow you as you passed by. If you walked up the main stairs, the number of steps would be different when you walked back down. If you turned on the taps in the science laboratory, blood would come flowing out instead of water. And if anyone dared to enter the last stall in the toilet on the ground floor, that person would never be seen alive again. The boys decided to go to the school at night to test if the legends were true or if they were just stories. On the 15th day of the month, they sneaked out of their houses and met up at exactly midnight. There were 4 boys altogether: Shinichi, Miko, Takashi, and Hiro. As they walked through the school gates and up the path, the boys stared at the statue, waiting for something to happen. The eyes of the statue were looking to the left, and even as the boys passed by, they did not move so much as an inch. "So much for that stupid legend," one of the boys chuckled. They entered the school building and cautiously walked up the stairs, counting each step. 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 13 steps in total. When they walked back down, there were still only 13 steps. "Another old wives' tale," said one of the boys. They made their way down the corridor to the science laboratory and turned on all the taps. Instead of blood, all that came gushing out was water. They each let out a disappointed sigh. "I knew it," said one of the boys. "We came here in vain." They decided to test out one more legend before they went home, and they went to the toilets on the ground floor. However, when they came to the door of the toilets, a few of the boys lost their nerve. Although they had talked excitedly about it, none of them seemed in a hurry to enter the haunted stall. Finally, one boy, Shinichi, stepped forward and told the others he was not afraid of anything. He pushed open the door and went into the toilet while his friends waited outside. The boys looked at the clock. It was exactly 1:00 a.m. A minute later, Shinichi came out of the toilet with a grin on his face. "Nothing," he said. "It's all just a bunch of kid stories and fairy tales." The boys all laughed and walked away. When they came out of the school, they walked back down the path. Before leaving, they took one last look at the statue, but its eyes were still looking to the left. "Man, what a letdown," one of the boys whispered contemptuously, and then they all went home. The next morning, each of the boys received a worried phone call from Shinichi's mother. "Was Shinichi with you last night?" she demanded. "He wasn't there when I checked his room this morning. He sneaked out, and he still hasn't come home. Where is he?" The boys felt that something was wrong. In the end, they decided to tell their parents about the little trip they had taken the night before. Their parents contacted the school principal, and soon the adults, the kids, and the principal were gathering outside of the school.
"What are you saying?" the school principal asked. "You're talking the statue outside the school? The eyes of that statue have always looked to the right."
"But when we were here last night, they were looking to the left," one of the boys exclaimed. Entering the gate, they were all shocked to see that the eyes of the statue were indeed looking to the right. "But what about the steps on the main staircase?" one of the boys cried. They all quickly ran to the staircase and counted the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12?
"Yes," said the school principal. "This staircase has always had 12 steps. When it was being built, the architects made a mistake in the design. It was supposed to have 13 steps.
"That's impossible," one of the boys shouted. "But what about the taps in the lab?"
Entering the science laboratory, they all looked at the sinks. Each one was caked with a dark red stain. The boys were numb with fear.
But what about Shinichi?" one of the boys mumbled. "He went into the toilet."
"Let's go and see," said the school principal in a grave voice. They all gathered outside the toilets. The boys and their parents looked at each other nervously. The principal took a deep breath, reached out, and pushed the door open. Shinichi's mother let out a blood-curdling scream and fainted. The others recoiled in horror, and some of them could not help vomiting all over the floor. The dead body of their friend Shinichi was hanging from the ceiling with a rope wrapped around his neck. His face was deathly pale, and his eyes were wide open, frozen in a look of horror. His throat had been cut from ear to ear, and all the blood had drained out of his body, covering the floor in a pool of dark red. His internal organs and intestines had been removed. They were sitting in a neat pile inside of the toilet bowl. One of the boys was in a daze. He was staring, unblinking, at the watch on Shinichi's wrist. It had stopped at exactly 1:00 a.m. The fishing boat. October 31st, 1927, Vancouver Island off the west coast of Canada. An American cargo ship called the Margaret Dollar was returning to the port of Seattle in Washington when it came across the small Japanese fishing boat that had been reported as missing. The name of the boat was Ryu Imaru. The fishing boat was in a terrible state. The hull was in tatters, and strewn across the deck were mummified remains, skeletonized bodies, corpses without legs. There was an intense stench of death and decay in the air. In the cabin, there was a mummified, skeletonized body with a crushed skull. The walls of the cabin were covered in bloodstains. In the kitchen room, the white feathers of seagulls lay scattered on the ground. Some oil cans were on top of the stove, and one of them contained a human arm. There was no food or drinking water on board. The engine was completely destroyed and rusted. However, 3 yellowed notebooks were found in the captain's room, and they contained a devastating account of what happened on the Ryu Imaru. It was unbelievable. Here's the information contained in those notebooks. December 5th, 1926. The Ryu Imaru set sail from the Saki port in Kanagawa Prefecture with a crew of 12 people. The owner is Fuji Shanshiro, the captain is Miki Tokizo, and Hosoi Denjiro is the chief engineer. The ship has a single mast and weighs 9 tons. December 6th. We were going in search of tuna off the coast of Choshi in Chiba Prefecture. The weather conditions were very bad, and the engine was making strange sounds. We docked at Choshi Port to have the engine checked, but no problems were found. We set sail again and landed a large amount of tuna off the coast of Choshi, but we were hit by a storm that made it impossible to navigate. Over the next few days, The boat was washed over 1,000 miles east off the coast of Choshi. December 15th. We saw another ship appear on the horizon. It was named the Kishu. Even though we screamed out as it passed, there was no response. Captain Miki decided to allow the boat to drift. There was enough food on board to last us at least 4 months. December 16th. Another ship called the Oriental Steamer passed us. We signaled and shouted, but again, there was no response. Efforts were made to try and return to Japan somehow, but no matter what we did, we were forced in the opposite direction. The crew began to despair. All we can do is wait until another steamer passes by. The captain has decided to allow the winds to help the boat drift to America. However, he says that for a fishing boat to sail northeast is more difficult than the journey of Christopher Columbus to discover America. December 27th. We fished for tuna. January 27th. We put out buckets to collect rainwater. We were hoping to use it as drinking water, but it rained very little. February 17th. Our food supplies are dangerously low. March 6th. Our stores of food are at the bottom. Only one fish. The Grim Reaper and terrible hunger come gradually. March 7th. Chief Engineer Hosoi Denjiro has died. He passed away while groaning, "I want to touch the soil of Japan again. I want to see it again. Just a glance." We buried him at sea. March 9th. We managed to catch a single big shark, but Noe Senzugi had no energy to eat. He died emaciated. We buried him at sea. March 15th. Izawa Satsugi, who had been keeping the ship's logbook, died from an illness. Matsumoto Genosuke is taking over his place. We buried Izawa at sea. It's only a matter of time until we all perish. We're all pale-faced with long beards, walking unsteadily around the boat like sad ghosts. March 27th. 2 men, Yokota Yoshinsuke and Terada Hatsuzo, suddenly became delirious, shouting, "Hey, we're in America! I can see a rainbow!" It's madness. They began biting and gnawing on planks of wood. The worst pit of hell is finally close. March 29th. Yoshida Fujiyoshi caught a big tuna fish. Mitani Torakichi went into a sudden frenzy. He grabbed an axe and swung it at the head of Yoshida Fujiyoshi. It was horrific, but none of us had the energy to stand up and stop him. We just stared in stunned silence. Those of us who remain have scurvy from lack of vegetables, and there's blood on our teeth. We look like monsters. Oh, Buddha, please help us. April 4th. Captain Mickey caught a bird that flew low over the deck. He reached up and grabbed it with the speed of a snake. Everyone flocked around him like man-eating ants, tearing off the feathers and devouring it alive. Our mouths were dripping with blood and raw meat. Nothing could be so delicious. This is how men turn into beasts. April 6th. Sujimon Ryoji died, spitting and puking up blood. April 14th. Sawamura Kanjuro unexpectedly went mad and turned violent. He started chopping up the corpses and eating human flesh. Is this hell? Are we in hell? April 19th. 2 people, Kazuo Toyama and Sawamura Kanjuro, fought over the human flesh in the kitchen. They were like demons out of hell. The rest of us just want to live to see Japan again. That night, the 2 men died tumbling around on the floor covered in blood. May 6th. Captain Mickey and myself are the only 2 survivors of the 12 who set sail. We're both very ill with beriberi and cannot move even 1 step. We're so dehydrated we can't even pee. May 11th. A mighty little wind from the northwest. It's cloudy. West and south, the boat floats with the wind. No mountains are visible. No land is visible. No other ships. There's only the stench of death and the mushy, rotting flesh and blood of our dead friends. Their bodies are nothing but skeletons. We're at the end of the world. And this is where the log ends. When you examine the records, a bizarre fact comes to light. While the crew of the fishing boat claimed they didn't need another ship and nobody responded to their signals, that cannot be true. Also, the Ryuimaru crossed the Pacific Ocean and claimed that they were not able to even find one island. How could that be? The strangest thing of all was a statement made by Captain Richard Healy of the U.S. cargo ship, the West Asen. December 23, 1926. We found a wooden boat drifting on the waves in the Pacific Ocean about 1,000 kilometers from Seattle. Even though it was close, there was no reply to our rescue signals. The name of the boat was Ryuimaru. About 10 sailors stood on the deck staring at us, but not one of them replied to our calls. But this encounter isn't mentioned in the records of the Ryuimaru. What could have happened to these men? Yama Uba. The Yama Uba, or the Mountain Witch, is a demon from Japanese folklore who lives in a hut in the mountains and eats anyone who is unfortunate enough to cross her path. Yama Uba is a hideous old hag with long, straggly, yellowed hair, piercing eyes, tattered clothing, and a gaping mouth that stretches across her entire face. The Mountain Witch was once a normal old woman living in a small village in Japan, but the area experienced a terrible famine and food became scarce. Her children didn't want to feed her anymore, so they drove her out of the village and left her in the woods to die of starvation. But Yama Uba didn't die. She made her way up into the mountains and found shelter in a cave. Living alone for so many years gradually drove her insane, and she became a cannibal, existing on the flesh of the people that she killed. She built a little hut deep in the forest, and now, to survive, she preys on travelers who become lost in the mountains. She poses as a pretty young woman and offers them shelter for the night in her hut. Once they fall asleep, she kills them and eats them. Sometimes she uses her hideous hair to entangle her victims and drag them into her giant mouth. In some stories, the Mountain Witch offers to lead a lost traveler back onto the right path. Instead, she leads him off the edge of a cliff, and he falls to his death on the rocks below. The Yama Uba then rushes down to the bottom of the cliff and hungrily feasts on the poor traveler's remains. Harionago. Harionago, or the long-haired woman, is a Japanese urban legend about a ghost who attacks men with her hair. She's also known as Hariona, the hook woman, or the needle woman. In other parts of Japan, people refer to her as Nurre-Onna, the smiling woman, or Warionago, the smiling girl. Harionago is a Japanese ghost who appears in the form of a beautiful woman with extremely long hair. She has the ability to control her hair, and it snakes out like writhing tentacles. The tips of her long hair form into sharp hooks or barbs. At night, she stalks the lonely roads and back streets of Japan, searching for young men to attack. When she spots a young man who takes her fancy, she will smile at him. If the young man dares to return her smile, Harionago will unleash her terrible barbed hair and attack him. The sharp hooks at the end of her hair stick into the man's clothes and flesh, trapping him in her clutches. Once she has him ensnared with her long hair, he cannot move, and she uses the hooks to cut him to pieces or to tear him apart. In many small villages in Japan, there have been numerous reports of attacks on young men by Harionago. One night, a boy from Yamada village happened to be walking home on his own. As he turned down a narrow street, a beautiful girl came walking towards him. As she approached, he noticed that she was smiling at him. He thought that there was something strange about her, but he was attracted by her beautiful looks, and he smiled back at her. When he did, her hair fell down in disarray, and she pounced upon him. The boy was shocked and struggled to free himself from her clutches. Her hair rose up like tentacles, and the hooks snagged on his shirt, ripping it from his back. Somehow, he managed to get away and ran back to his house as fast as he could. He locked the door behind him and stood, shaking and trembling, at the front door, waiting for dawn to arrive. In the morning, when he dared open the door, he found hundreds of deep scratches on the other side. So, if you're walking down a street at night and you see a strange woman smiling at you from the shadows, you may want to think twice before you smile back at her. Face powder. The face powder hag, or Oshiroi Baba, is a demon from Japanese mythology. She tries to trick pretty young girls into using her special white face powder, claiming that it will make them more beautiful. Oshiroi Baba, or the face powder hag, is an old woman who walks through the snow wearing an oversized hat, leaning on a cane, and carrying a vial of white powder. Her wrinkled face is caked in layers of white makeup. She appears on cold nights, asking pretty young girls if they would like to try some of her special face powder. She tells the girls that if they use it to powder their faces, it will make them even more beautiful. However, as soon as the white powder touches their faces, the girls experience a horrible burning sensation. Their skin starts peeling, and their flesh starts to rot and fall from their faces, leaving nothing but a hideous skull. Oshiroi Baba then steals the flesh and uses it for her own unknown purposes. Shirime. Shirime is a Japanese ghost with no face who has a huge eye in his butt. At night, he scares unwary travelers on lonely roads by mooning them. In Japanese, shiri means butt, and me means eye, so the name Shirime literally means butt eye. The Japanese legend of Shirime is a strange and funny tale. Many years ago, a samurai was walking at night on the road to the Japanese city of Kyoto. Suddenly, a man dressed in a kimono stepped out of the shadows and blocked his path. "Who goes there?" asked the samurai nervously, readying himself for an attack. "Excuse me," said the man. "Could I have a moment of your time?" Before the samurai could answer, the man turned around, dropped his clothes and bent over. His bare buttocks opened wide, and the horrified samurai saw a huge glittering eye staring at him from the man's butt. A strange glowing light was emanating from the eye. When he saw this, the samurai screamed in terror and fled as fast as his legs would carry him. Shirime is one of the most popular ghosts in Japan because he does not harm his victims. He's just a mischievous ghost who likes to scare people. Information on Japanese demons. Nurre-Onna. Nurre-Onna is a skeleton woman. She hides her frightening form by keeping her back to you, but when she turns, you realize she has no face, just a bare skull. She tries to lure unwitting men into falling asleep, and then she sucks the life force out of them. Kitsune. Kitsune is an evil spirit with the head of a fox. It disguises itself as a beautiful woman and tries to trick human beings into marrying it. If you're unlucky enough to marry Kitsune, it will feed on your life essence while you are asleep. Shinigami. Shinigami is the Japanese version of the Grim Reaper. He usually appears to a dying person and brings them into the land of the dead. Wenyudo. Wenyudo is a strange evil spirit who guards the gates of hell. He appears as a severed head on a burning wheel. He enjoys scaring people and stealing their souls whenever they come too close to him. Ningyo. Ningyo is the Japanese version of the mermaid. Instead of being beautiful, Ningyo is a creepy woman who has fish scales for skin, a face like an ape, and razor-sharp teeth like a piranha. If you're out fishing and you catch Ningyo on your hook, you must immediately toss her back into the sea, or else your family members will suffer epic misfortune or even death. If you cook and eat Ningyo, you will remain beautiful and youthful for all eternity, but your family will die. Akaname. Akaname is a hideous creature that looks like a frog with a very long tongue. It has a single claw on each foot. He lurks in filthy bathrooms at night and licks the feces off of the toilets and the floor. If you encounter him, he will try to use that very same tongue to lick your face. Nurre-Kabe. Nurre-Kabe is an evil spirit who appears in the shape of a wall. He has the ability to stretch endlessly and loves to play tricks on travelers. He stretches out and blocks the roads to prevent the travelers from going through. The only way that you can get through is to kick the lower area of Nurre-Kabe to make him disappear. The Demon Cat. Long ago in Japan, there were many superstitions surrounding cats. Many people believed that a cat could turn into a hideous demon cat called a Bakeneko if it lived in the same place for 13 years and if it reached over 8 pounds in weight. They say the demon cat is able to walk on 2 legs like a human. It can also shapeshift and take on human form, sometimes devouring people and stealing their identities. The Bakeneko can also reach in through doorways with its enormous arms, looking for human prey, just like a household cat pawing around inside of a mouse hole. The famous demon story involves a man named Takasu Genbei, whose pet cat of many years went missing, just as his mother's personality changed completely. The woman shunned company and took her meals alone in her room, and when the curious family peered in on her, they saw not a human being, but a feline monster in the old lady's clothes, chewing on animal carcasses. Takasu, with much reluctance, slew what looked like his mother, and after a day had passed, the body turned back into the same pet cat that had gone missing. After that, Takasu miserably tore up the tatami mats and the floorboards in his mother's room, only to find the old woman's bones hidden there, gnawed clean of flesh. Another famous story called The Devil Cat of Nabeshima tells of a prince who fell victim to a demon cat. One night, the prince was walking in the palace gardens with his favorite geisha, a girl named Otoyo. Little did he know that they were being watched by a shadowy creature who was lurking in the shadows. After the prince retired to his bedroom, The demon cat slipped undetected into the geisha's apartment and waited under the bed until the girl was asleep. At midnight, the demon cat pounced on the sleeping woman and strangled her to death. Then it dragged her body outside, dug a hole under the flower beds, and buried her corpse in a shallow grave. After concealing its horrible deed, the demon cat shape-shifted and took on the form of the dead geisha, fooling everyone. Each night, the demon cat, disguised as the geisha, slipped into the prince's room and drank his blood. Soon, the prince was complaining of horrible dreams. He grew very weak and very pale. All the doctors that he saw were baffled by his mysterious illness, and the prince ordered his guards to stand in his room and to keep watch over him while he slept. However, as midnight approached, the guards found themselves feeling incredibly drowsy, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't stay awake. Eventually, a young soldier who had served under the king came to the castle. When he heard about the strange events, he volunteered to stay up and keep watch over the prince. As midnight approached, the soldier saw the other guards nodding off, one by one. The soldier started to feel drowsy too. Desperate to stop himself from falling asleep, he took out his dagger and he stabbed himself in the thigh, keeping himself awake. Whenever he felt like he was going to nod off, he would twist the knife in his wound to increase the pain and stay awake. At midnight, the soldier watched as the sliding doors of the prince's room parted. The beautiful geisha crept silently into the room and made her way over to the prince's bedside. The soldier rose up, his knife in hand, and when the geisha turned and saw him, she left as quickly and quietly as she had come in. For the next 3 nights, the dutiful soldier stood guard over the sleeping prince, stabbing himself every night to stay awake. The prince's strength began to return. When the soldier tried to tell him about the geisha, however, the prince refused to listen. He would not allow anyone to question the loyalty of his favorite girlfriend. Undeterred, the soldier made plans to get rid of the geisha himself. That very night, the soldier knocked on the geisha's door. He told her that he had a message for her from the prince. When she opened the door, the soldier suddenly drew his dagger and tried to stab her, but she easily sidestepped his attack. The geisha transformed back into the Bakeneko and sprang at the soldier in a fury, hissing and spitting as she tried to defend herself. The two fought wildly, but when the soldier began to get the upper hand, the Bakeneko fled, springing through the window, onto the roof, and down into the garden, and it managed to escape into the mountains. The next day, the soldier told the prince what had happened. The palace gardener was digging in the flower beds and uncovered the body of the real geisha. Grief-stricken, the prince ordered his guards to hunt down the demon cat. At some point in the future, it was finally located and killed by the young soldier who had first discovered its evil secret. The Icicle Woman. There was a man who had never married. He lived alone in a small house in the wilderness of Japan. He was very lonely and longed for someone that he could spend his life with. One winter morning, he was gazing out of his window when he happened to notice some icicles hanging under the eaves of his house. He said to himself, "I wish I had a wife as beautiful as those icicles." That night, there was a knock on his front door. When the man answered it, he saw a beautiful woman standing on his doorstep. Her body was long and slender, and her face was pale as snow. He invited her in out of the cold. As time passed by, the woman never left, and the couple fell in love. They decided to live as husband and wife. There was just one small problem. The man noticed that his beautiful wife never took a bath. Whenever he tried to talk to her about this, she refused to discuss it. One day, the husband had had enough. He grabbed his wife and dragged her into the bathroom. She screamed and cried and tried to wriggle away from him. He threw her into the piping hot water, then left her there and slammed the door shut behind him. An hour had passed, and all the man could hear was silence. There were no splashing sounds coming from the bathroom at all. Thinking that this was strange, he opened the bathroom door and peeked inside. It was empty. His wife was gone. All that he saw, floating in the water, was the hair comb his wife always wore. The man was heartbroken. He assumed his wife had left him and ran away. He decided to move on with his life. A few months later, he met a new woman and they fell in love. She came to live with him and they passed the months happily together until winter came around again. After a night of heavy snowfall, the man looked out the window and noticed a huge icicle under the eaves of his house. He went outside to knock it off, but there was a woman standing outside in the snow. He recognized her. It was his wife. Inside the house, the new woman heard a terrible agonized shriek. She rushed outside and found the man lying in the snow. He was dead, and his blood was spreading out through the snow around his head. A single huge icicle had pierced right through his eye and penetrated his brain. Thank you again for joining us for this video. We hope you enjoyed these tales of Japanese urban legends, monsters, and yokai. If you have any suggestions of videos or topics that you would like us to cover, please let us know in the comments or send us an email. Take care of yourselves out there. Until next time, sweet dreams.